Welcome back, dear friends, to Highlights on the Book of Action and Reaction. This week, we will be giving our highlights on Chapter 9 specifically. It is entitled Silas' Story. Leo, what a fascinating chapter.
It is.
Although in the past, I know we have said that Chapter 7 was this pivotal chapter. This chapter is almost like it comes to a head for us because we are so moved. Because, Leo, we learn in Chapter 8 that right at the end, when Silas tells Andre Luiz and Eladio that this particular case of Clorindo and Leonel, that he's not just going to need the common tools to really help them begin back to their redemptive process, meaning to stop obsessing Luiz, who was their incarnate nephew. But he says something. He says that they're two powerful minds, that only love is really going to help them to modify themselves. And how do they do that? Or more specifically, how does Silas, along with the help of Andre Luiz and Eladio, he does that by touching their emotions. And that is what's so interesting, because it's not that it's a brainwashing, Leo, because at first glance you might think, oh, well, he's strategically brainwashing them. No, it's sort of a enlightenment he offers to them with his own personal story. And that's what Chapter 9 is about. It's about Silas, Andre Luiz, and Eladio. They go back to Luiz's home, who is the incarnate, the son of Antonio Olimpio, who is the case that they're interceding on, right?
It's interesting because you're touching a very specific point where there is a strategy going back to this house now. Whereas in the first part of on Chapter 8, we saw that they went there, they were analyzing, observing,
right.
they checked the environment and what was happening there. Now he's coming back with this beautiful rescue, but it's very strategically, where he's commenting on his situation, on what happened to him in the last reincarnation and what he has caused, to touch the heart of those who are there in despair, creating despair on the life of others as well. In his case, on their case in the book, Luis's case. So it's interesting that we will see, and we'll discuss here a little bit, his situation, what he had done in his past life because of greed, because of the love of money, right? So we see that how he comes back and he unfolds his story, hence the name Silas' story.
It's interesting, Leo, how he kind of starts off the chapter, meaning Andre Luiz, how he begins to depict it for us. Because they start out, they just observe again Luis's family, they're having dinner, they're just doing their normal family thing. And one of the brothers actually turns to Andre Luiz, Eladio, and Silas, and he says, see, look at Luiz. He's so pessimistic. They even say he's the embodiment of defeatism. So he's saying he hasn't changed. Why does he deserve anything that's good or positive? And it's interesting, the idea that Silas implants in his mind. And it's the idea of opportunity for forgiveness.
Opportunity for forgiveness, yes, because after some of the comments that Luis makes, then Leonel actually comes and makes a comment. You see, like you said, he's just somebody who doesn't even think about helping those who are around him, because of the love of the money and the greediness and all. And in this case, Silas says, well, how can you say that the person can become a better individual when no chance is given to this person? When you're there perturbing and just inciting more want of the money and everything. And then Silas makes a comment based on the teachings that we receive from Jesus. And I'm going to paraphrase this, and I'm going to quote here from the book because it's very interesting, because it gives a different understanding of what Jesus have said when he said, help your enemies. And then he goes to say, I often think that such a statement, if correctly interpreted, means help your enemies so that they can pay the debts they have entangled themselves in, thereby restoring the balance of life. You and they will both both will be benefited with peace. Given that opportunity for the person to say I'm sorry when they have done something wrong. Given the opportunity for someone to make amendments with you and the universe, right? But quite frankly, what do? We shut ourselves off.
Yep.
We shut that person off saying, no, I don't want to see you again. I want to deal with you again. And perhaps with our minds, when we cannot do directly, what do? We obsess that person. We bring the person down. And there is no forgiveness, let alone benevolence, indulgence towards that individual.
Exactly. But what's interesting is it reminds us of a passage, a story about that Jesus, actually a parable that Jesus tells his disciples. And it's about that man who owes a debt to another man, right? So that man goes to his one who he has a huge debt with, and the creditor basically says, well, you have to pay up. But he begs him for forgiveness, to ask for him to, hey, I don't have anything to pay you. So the creditor feels bad and he lets him go free, forgives his debt. That man goes out. Remember, the man who was just forgiven for his debt goes out, finds another man who owes him money, and goes after another man to pay him back his money. And when the old creditor finds out that he didn't do what he had done for him, which is he forgave his debt, and he said, well, I forgave you for your debt, but you can't forgive somebody else for his debt. In the story, at least in the Bible, they talk about how this man's going to be condemned and whatnot. But we know in Spiritism, we learn that is merely an example of the law of cause and effect. Because it's not that God condemns us, God punishes us, but as we learn in this book, it's about the law of cause and effect. And we need to give our friends, even our enemies, which is, this is an idea that is so powerful. We don't hear it anywhere else, about giving your enemies the opportunity to pay back a debt. That's powerful. With
Spiritism, it's interesting what you're saying, because with Spiritism alone, understanding the idea of life after life, opportunity after opportunity, we see that God loves us all. God is always telling us, okay, here's another opportunity. I know you erred, you have done this, but there are thousands of opportunities in one day that we have in our lives. So it's amazing to see here, with this example that you're bringing and what's happening in their lives. Yeah. But it's interesting because he goes on again to talk about what? His situation.
Right.
He brings them out of the house, as Andre Luiz poetic say, under the stars. He started telling his situation, what happened to him, what happened to his last reincarnation, where there was an involvement with his mother, right, his father. Later on in life, the father getting married again after the mother passed away. And what happened?
And you're talking specifically about Silas' story.
Silas' story, yes.
Because Silas begins to tell Clorindo Lionel, and actually Andre Luiz and Eladio as well, his story of his life. And Leo, before we go to a little bit more depth about Silas' story, what we found most interesting was that, why did he decide to tell his personal story? Yes, it was strategic. Yes, it was probably planned. But you can see, if you read between the lines, when he makes that comment, that we should help our enemies, that we should help one another, what is the response of Clorindo and Lionel? It's not a good response. They basically turn to Silas and say, help? Why should we help? He needs to pay up. He needs to pay back. So there we see the great mind of Silas. Once he sees that, he realizes, well, I guess that's not working. I have to go a more profound route, which is the touching of the sentiments, the touching of the emotion. That's when he opens up and tells a story, which basically is similar in the way that to Clorindo Lionel, that he also in a previous existence was very attached to money. We don't want to give away the story because, dear friends, this is just a teaser. We want you to go and read the chapter. But he tells a story that is so moving that even Andre Luiz and Eladio, along with Clorindo and Lionel, they're all kind of like with their mouths
what happened?
Open, like, what?
And they question, is he telling just to
Andre Luiz
change
questions.
their hearts? Yes.
He questions to himself, is he just making up this story just to change their hearts? Exactly. So it is very moving, but we learn that it is through touching somebody else's sentiment. Sharing your personal story, not just for egocentric purposes, but to help the other, to help somebody else, to go through their problem, and to give them a broader perspective. Did we know that that is charity? That's amazing. It's a different form of charity.
It's a way to connect, because also, as we were, studying this chapter, we can see that Silas could have gone back to the house and demanded things to happen. As a person that is, as an individual who is highly elevated, he didn't do that. He took the other approach. Let me go ahead and bring some of my situations, some of my sufferings, that they perhaps can look into a different way, a different analysis, bring them into a different analysis, so they can go ahead and leave this poor man alone, with all the respect to what he has done and the way he lives his life now, but still just to analyze in a different way, from a different point of view.
Leo, you mentioned something really interesting, because sometimes we feel like power is forcing our way, but we learn about Jesus and the power that he used of persuasion, not in a trickery, wanting to trick people, but in a way because of his morally elevated personality. He exuded this. Leo, there's a really probably really old tale that's told to children about the wind and the sun, and they basically have a fight. And they say, well, they see a man who's walking, and the wind says to the sun, I can make this man take off his clothes. And the sun very calmly says, okay, we can make a bet. So the wind begins to blow and blow on the man, and then you see the man, his hat's falling off and his shirt's coming off, but he's struggling to keep it on. But finally, after so much effort, the wind realizes, I can't make the man take off his clothes. What happens? The sun very calmly makes it warmer, just very calmly, and the man, within 5 minutes, is half naked and is ready to jump into the lake. So we see the personal power of persuasion in a kind and calm way. That's what Silas does, without forcing his will, giving Clorindo and Lionel the opportunity to modify themselves. And it's the same opportunity that we believe that God and Jesus gives to us as well, Leo.
Most certainly. But we see here the importance of analyzing what he went through. There was a great calling from his mother for him to engage, to become a doctor, to be a good individual. The father didn't listen too much for their the callings of the mother, and then again he didn't leave a very good life towards the opportunity that he had, along with his mother, with his father. So the mother again went back and tried to do what? Emphasize the idea of helping others, becoming a doctor and helping others, and do good, as we all invited in our daily lives. The mother passed away right before he
Silas,
receives his medical degree, and the father again remarries another person. But he's so attentive to the money that the father has, that he doesn't want the mother-in-law, right?
And this is all Silas' story.
The stepmother, not a mother, the stepmother, to take the money. So he, again, give emphasis to the money, give emphasis to the good life.
Right,
to live the money.
And that was part of Silas' story, Leo. You gave a little snapshot into it. But the most beautiful thing is how they end this chapter, and that's what we'll leave you with, is a quote that they actually bring from Jesus when they say that Jesus recommended to incarnate souls, reconcile quickly with your adversary while you are still on the way with him. Friends, we talk about law of cause and effect, but ultimately it is also about forgiveness. It is about taking the opportunity today to reconcile with your adversary. And perhaps that would be a tidbit, maybe something you could practice at home. Maybe the person who you've had, a bad experience with is no longer on this earth. But pray, find a way to work with this forgiveness inside of yourself, dear friends, because if it's not today, then in some other incarnation, we have to come to terms with this idea of forgiveness. We recommend you to go and read this chapter and be enlightened. Until next time.